Well, thank you all for having me, and I'm really happy to be here today to talk to you a little bit about my tiny little town I live in. So the former presenters talked on a very macro level of sport tourism. I'm going to bring it down to a very micro, rural perspective on sport tourism and what that looks like for us. Which way is forward? So I'll just give you a quick overview today about the town of Banff. That's Jess Labonte. She works with me on my team. And that's her at Snow Days, one of our tourist events we host in the winter months. I'll talk a little bit about sport tourism in Banff. Our very stringent sport tourism policy, as those folks talked about today, it's very important to have a very robust policy to make sure you're bringing in the right events. New emerging markets that we have in our communities and in Canada, and then I'll just do a quick wrap-up. So a little bit about Banff. It's nestled in the Canadian Rocky Mountains. It's within the province of Alberta. It's renowned for its amazing mountain scenery, crisp blue lakes, abundant recreation opportunities such as skiing, hiking, and wildlife viewing. I've been lucky enough to live there for the last 8 years in my role as the recreation manager. This position is quite unique, especially for someone who works in the recreation world, in that I have to balance the demands of our community with the needs of visitor services and amenities. So it's really hard because we have to make sure our residents are happy, that they're healthy, and using these public facilities for recreation. At the same time, the visitors have to have that same access to those facilities to do the similar activities and events. Banff is actually Canada's first national park, and it was founded in 1885, gaining its national park status in 1887. Although a young country and a young town on the world stage, Banff has cherished the Indigenous people's rights, cultures, practice on the sacred lands, along with maintaining much of the town's heritage and history. The municipality of Banff is governed by an incorporation agreement with the federal government, which has been in place since the early 1990s. The town was incorporated to better be able to provide resident and especially visitor services that were previously done by the federal government, which is in Ottawa on the other side of the country. The incorporation agreement pillars include that we must maintain the town site as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. We must provide a wide range of services such as accommodations, dining, attractions, tours, and general visitor services. And we must ensure the look and feel of the town fits within its national park setting and its natural setting. This is accomplished through stringent land use bylaws that control the type and look of each commercial and residential space, and Parks Canada acts as the regulatory body that provides the final approval for all development and ensures it aligns with the Federal Parks Act. This includes any new or revitalized recreation infrastructure, park space, and also includes large-scale events. The town must also provide essential programs and services for those living in the community, such as recreation, healthcare, housing, education, and emergency services. Probably one of the most unique elements of our community is that the town itself is only 4 kilometers squared within the 7,000 kilometers squared national park. Those 4 square kilometers can never expand, and that's where our 9,000 residents live. To maintain adequate housing for the services required for this community, you must work in the tourism industry or one of the support service sectors in order to live in Banff. So lots of unique things for a municipality. The Rocky Mountains themselves are made up of 3 distinct communities: Banff, Canmore, and Jasper. I'm not sure if it's come to Korea, but Jasper just had a large wildfire, and we lost 30% of that town site this summer, so it was quite devastating for our Rocky Mountain communities. The total population combined for these 3 communities is only 30,000 people. That's it. The number of tourists that the residents in Banff alone serve each year is over 4.3 million. And when you combine it with Canmore and Jasper, it's over 7 million. The park's visitation has grown by over 30% in the last decade, so exponential growth with no population increase. The Canadian Rockies make up 20% of domestic and 50% of international visitor expenditures for the province of Alberta. In numbers, Banff contributes over $1.2 billion to GDP, 14,000 jobs, that includes permanent and part-time and term positions, and $182 million in taxes every year. Our taxation model includes a 5-to-1 commercial to residential property tax split and a 4% provincial accommodation tax for every hotel stay. Banff does not currently control how that 4% hotel tax is spent, unlike Whistler, who has a 3% hotel tax, and the municipality holds that and determines how they're going to spend it within their community. Banff, Canmore, and Jasper are currently lobbying our provincial government to move to a similar model to have more autonomy over our community. So what does sport tourism look like in Banff? So generally speaking, for outdoor sport tourism, we have a small adventure tourism commercial market that focuses on guided tours for rock climbing, hiking, backcountry skiing, biking, and via ferrata. These typically appeal to a higher-end clientele where there's an abundance of, but there is also an abundance of self-guided options available for middle-class visitors in the areas of resort skiing, hiking, biking, rafting, and sightseeing. The Canmore Nordic Centre, just next door to Banff, is also an internationally recognized training and event facility and hosts major Nordic events which contribute to the local economy. As an example, the 2022 Masters World Cup contributed over $2 million to the regional economy, with the 2021 Para World Cup $1.4 million. In the town of Banff, we placed a stronger focus on sport tourism activities and events that will benefit residents first and visitors. In 2010, for example, we invested $33 million in municipal funds to upgrade and expand the Winter Sport Community Recreation Center to meet growing demands of resident sport needs, and to better serve world-class sporting events. Since that time, the municipality has invested another $14 million to build a new skate park, pump track, sports field, and field house. These facilities draw tourists from across our nation, looking to engage in these activities during their travels and to support regional sports events. Residents can access these outdoor facilities at no cost, and there is immense benefits from them sharing these opportunities with prospective tourists and to groups. So what kind of events have we held? Very wide range. So we hosted a few years ago the World Deaf Curling Championship, probably one of the most unique events we've ever held. Last year we hosted the National Women's Para Hockey Team for their training camp. We host the TSN All-Stars Curling, which is an internationally recognized curling event with the world's top curlers, and it's for trials for the Olympics as well. We host the World Juniors Hockey Training Camp almost every year for Team Canada, who usually does fairly well. NHL teams, Pittsburgh Penguins, Florida Panthers, Vegas Knights, and many more. We regularly get NHL teams stopping through our community for training camps and different things, and they'll utilize our facilities during the day. We have two major marathons that I'll speak a little bit more about in a bit. Lots of yoga festivals, wellness events, and Indigenous powwows and dance competitions. Other events held in the region includes the Men's World Cup ski racing in Lake Louise at the Lake Louise Ski Resort, which brought in $23 million to the province each year it was held. So that was held the last 3 years. The direct and indirect economic impacts for these type of events can be great if they're well coordinated, promoted, and delivered with all stakeholders engaged and supporting. As mentioned, we host 2 marathons each year. That's a total of 2 days. It's only 8,000 participants. We have a cap on the number of participants allowed, so that's 4,000 per event. The resulting visitor expenditure for those 2 events is $15 million. The community actually embraces the events, even with road closures and busy streets, as the event host provides $50,000 to local charities in exchange for volunteer services for the event. The municipality also collects permit fees to offset support services required for the event, and although nominal at $50,000, it helps maintain public support. If the economic and community benefits are not communicated and supported at all levels, it can fail. As an example, we just actually lost the Men's World Cup in Lake Louise this year, and solely because the provincial government wouldn't support $1.3 million for snowmaking and advertising. It's the first event we hold each year. It's at a time where the resort is slower, so it's a really good generator for our hotels and for that off-season time of year for us. So that means we're now losing out on $20 million in visitor spending every year. So it's a big impact for our small community. You'll also see on the chart I have here that for our facility usage, we have municipal facility rental hours. So this is all of our public facilities in total in our community. It's almost 75% of it is used by residents for resident sports and activities. Yet 50% of our revenue to support these facilities comes from non-residents. So that's visitors and that's regional sports events we're hosting. In Canada, domestic visitor spending continues to rise at a rapid rate, where international is still rebounding post-COVID. So in the last few years, we really placed a strong focus on regional sport tourism. The most significant benefit to this market, as some of the former speakers have mentioned, is that it's much easier to build and maintain, it's very consistent, and it costs little to market too. To capitalize on non-resident regional tourism within our town, like Whistler, we use a tiered pricing structure for use of all of our public facilities and spaces. We recognize the need for local sports organizations to use the facilities outside of tournaments to sustain and offset operating costs and maintenance costs for infrastructure. It's never an easy balance between resident and non-resident use of events. Locals want unrestricted access. Business want regional events and tournaments for hotel stays. Hosts want to come to Banff as it's a world-class premier destination and it's easy to market to, and I can go on and on. So it's not surprising that we need good policy to balance these complex demands, and we require real data to make the good decisions. So how do we get the data? Actually, can you guys back there go back a few slides for me? Great, thank you. So how do we get the data to make these tough policy decisions? In Canada, we have the Canadian Sport Tourism Council. The STC is an independent body, but it's funded by the federal government, and it provides resources on bidding process and criteria, event planning, and it provides the STEAM tool, or the Sport Tourism Economic Modeling Tool. STEAM gauges the socio-economical, environmental, and economic impacts of each potential sport tourism event we're considering anywhere in our country at any level. Positive economic impacts can include the money spent by attendees and participants, short and long-term employment created. I should note here that as a resort town, we are great at hosting events due to the flexibility of our hospitality staff, and many of whom have backgrounds in sport and event management. There are also benefits such as new government revenue sources and brand recognition through media attention. We always wonder about this because we don't really feel that Banff needs more media attention. We feel most people know where it is and what it's about, but it does provide that. We also measure negative economic impacts such as the cost to build and maintain infrastructure. Essentially, we need to know, will we have enough regular community use to maintain the infrastructure long term, or can we ensure it can be repurposed or be multi-purpose to use after the event and for other opportunities? Although short-term job creation is easy for events, transitioning those to long-term employment can be very difficult. Lastly, new recreation infrastructure in a community inevitably increases the areas surrounding housing and affordability. And this is specifically when we're thinking about community rec facilities used for that community use, as well as for those destination events. That does result in an increase in housing costs, and that can affect affordability in your community. On the social side, we measure the impact of resident life before, during, and after an event. We need to ensure there's local support, and we need that local expertise and volunteers to deliver these major events. In the mountains, that can be route setting for biking or climbing, snowmaking and packing for skiing, and more. Many residents who live in Banff were very involved in the Whistler Olympics, and they were involved in actually helping with the track setting for almost all ski events. So that local knowledge base is very important. On the environmental side, we need to ensure projects result in land reclamation, not degradation, and that there are solid waste, air, emergency, and traffic management plans, and we need to know we have a host who's actually going to be able to deliver on that. In Banff, on top of it, most events now need to be zero waste for the entirety of the event happening. The reality is travelers, more than ever, want to know that their experience will not have a negative impact on the local people, its culture, or the environment. So how do we support sport tourism in Canada, Alberta, and in our local communities? Can you guys go to the next slide? We're going to do this method. Thank you. Sport tourism in Canada is governed by the Physical Activity and Sport Act. This act ensures that sports events are equitably held across our country. It has to have both economic and social benefits to the hosting communities, and we obviously use our STEAM tool to help us identify those things. And the Act has a strategic framework to ensure the bidding and funding opportunities for international and national events are fair by ensuring proposals are financially sound, and that includes the long term. We don't just look at short term, we look at that long term as well. They contribute to athletic excellence, sport leadership, and reflect Canada's sport culture and diversity. We also have Heritage Canada. It's an arm of the Canadian government that oversees all bids and funding for large-scale events in Canada and provides grants for bidding and hosting events. Many nations and provinces around the world have similar framework, like the UK's Gold Framework, and these are really valuable in event planning and bidding processes. On the provincial level, we have Alberta Sport, which provides $250,000 grants to host regional, national, and international events. These events must always be sanctioned by national sports organizations or international federations. We regularly have Olympic and Paralympic qualifying and World Cup events within our province. On the regional level, sport tourism is supported through destination marketing firm grants, marketing, and partnerships. For the town of Banff, the municipality budgets over $7 million, which is attained through business licensing fees, that's funneled to Banff Lake Louise Tourism to promote regional, national, and international tourism opportunities and sport events happening in our community. Although three major elements of sport tourism prosper in Canada today, and that's just my personal opinion, and that being infrastructure, funding, and intergovernmental relations, the industry itself is struggling with capacity. The number of educational institutes offering sport tourism programs and the awareness of the field is dwindling across our country. The Canadian Parks and Recreation Association, and along with all its affiliates, are working with universities across Canada to address this gap, because currently it is a major barrier for us to be able to deliver. Can you go to the next slide, please? So in Banff, as I've mentioned, we have a collaborative approach and unified support for each sport tourism opportunity. And we have to include everyone that's going to be positively and negatively impacted, including the residents, all of our nonprofit organizations, the Tourism Bureau, businesses, and various levels of government. Again, this is the micro level of it in my sense, but I literally mean we have every nonprofit organization, every level of government, everyone who could be impacted in our community at these discussions when we're talking about a sporting event. And here's the reason why. Banff feels peak tourism from May to October each year. We have 40,000 visitors in the urban town site each day of the weekend. There is little desire from our town to promote sport tourism during this time, so that's from May to October. Our hotel rooms, restaurants, and other services are fully booked, and our staff are at capacity. In the winter months, tourism remains strong with many visitor attractions and services like our ski resorts at or near capacity. We have 4 resorts within a 1-hour distance from the town. That includes Mount Norquay, 15 minutes from the town, Lake Louise, about an hour, Sunshine, 30 minutes, and Nakiska. The ski resorts typically open from early December to late March each year, leave a very short shoulder season in October, November, and April and May for us. It's during these months, and I should highlight here, only these months, that we work with Banff Lake Louise Tourism and others to host regional, national, and international events. Outside of those times, they are not permitted within our town site. We don't need it. We already are full. We have enough tourism happening naturally. There's a variety of policies on the regional level that dictate what sport events make sense for Banff. This includes our special event policy. And it outlines the parameters for destination sport events, because as I mentioned, it has to go back to align with that national park feel, our UNESCO World Heritage Site. So the number of events we have, the number of days, the time of year, the number of participants, and the values. We do not have car shows or circuses, I should add, anymore. In the 60s and 70s, that wasn't the case. It must demonstrate sound financial support for the local economy, has to have the strongest sustainability practices, so as I mentioned, zero waste is a requirement almost for all events, and that host has to demonstrate their ability to deliver on traffic, communication, and emergency management planning. Every event we consider goes under this assessment, and not all events for us make sense or are possible. Drilling down from this level, we actually have a policy that we built with the same partners to outline how we allocate space in public facilities and in parks. We prioritize resident-focused sporting events, so the policy dictates that. It's residents first for access to our facilities for any of their sporting events and tournaments. And where visitors are welcome, as they can provide the consistent revenue more easily and they're growing more rapidly. We then focus on short-term, high-value sporting events as they don't disrupt regular business as much, but they still have a high rate of return. Next slide, please. The three biggest emerging markets we are seeing in Canada right now are adaptive sport, Indigenous sport, and women's sport. The economic impact of adaptive and parasport-related events in the US was $140 million in 2022. This market will continue to grow, and there's huge opportunity here. In Canada, for example, any event that has a para or adaptive sport as the focus is heavily supported by federal grant application processes. On the Indigenous sport and culture side of things, we have a whole branch of the arm in the Canadian government called Sport for Social Development in Indigenous Communities. They provide millions of dollars in funding each year for Indigenous nations and organizations who deliver Indigenous sport and recreation opportunities in the communities they serve. Tourists want that authentic Canadian experience, and Indigenous tourism and Indigenous sport tourism is a great way to tap into that market. Women's sport continues to grow in viewership, spectatorship, and participation, especially in the area of team sports like basketball and football. I'm choosing your guys' football here, not our type of football. Canada is in fact going to see its first WNBA team in Toronto in 2026. The same is true for outdoor adventure sports, especially ultramarathons and climbing. That business is estimated to be worth $2 trillion by 2032 across the globe, and women are a big part of that growth. We are lucky in Banff to have such an amazing backyard that provides passive recreation and sport opportunities. I can't explain to you what a wild ice skating experience is on a crystal clear lake, or ice climbing on waterfalls just minutes from our town. And to ensure we capitalize on those markets with our international tourism, because it really is passive, typically independent or small tour-based sport tourism, we have a really unique way of promoting these things. So for any Banff resident, it is free to do any type of recreation in our community. So if you want to go skating, you want to go play basketball, you want to curl, that's all free. It costs you nothing to go do those things. So a part of that reason we do that is we have a lot of visitors that come from across the globe, typically warmer countries, and this helps them become comfortable with those activities. It's easier for them to share and promote those activities and get buy-in from the larger visitors and tour base. In addition to that, we provide for Banff residents free guided skiing, rock climbing, avalanche safety, ice climbing, and a bunch more adventure sports, free of charge to do those things. That's guided activities. We do these local fam tours to produce local content that's authentic to prospective travelers. At the same time, it obviously contributes to residents enjoying this natural backyard. Again, people don't live in Banff. They're service sector employees. They are not mountain people like me. They typically come there because they're working in the hospitality sector, but this connects them to that, gives them a sense of social belonging in their community, and improves their well-being. On top of that, when you first move to Banff, you get something called an ambassador pass, and it essentially provides you free access to all of our attractions, some of those including sporting attractions. And so that obviously is another form of a local fam tour that's really easy to get that authentic, firsthand local sharing of our services we have in the community and tourist attractions. So the question would be, so we started implementing all this in 2020, so right before COVID or right when COVID hit, we decided to go free for residents, and we were curious to see what the economic impact would be. So I can state that for 2023 and coming to this year end in 2024, we've had 0 loss in revenue from doing this split BIM model, and we've actually increased our revenue generation for public facility use, user rates, and everything. So it's been great. As a result, our facilities have become very busy. They're over capacity, and we're looking to invest another $15 million into community recreation facilities that will also support destination visitor events in 2026. We don't really have a choice. We're at capacity in all our recreation facilities as a result of this shift. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just to wrap up here, I think that it's important to think about the long term when you're thinking about sport tourism. You have to think about employment. Is it going to be short term? Is it going to be long term? And what's the capacity based on the employees and the skill sets they have in your community? Can we deliver on it? If you're going to build new infrastructure, can you maintain it in the long term? But so much more important than can you maintain it in the long term, is it going to be used by your community and the people that surround that building and that infrastructure? And I really believe in order to achieve that, you need to prioritize locals. I get that we have some of these really big arenas and really big facilities, and they get used once a week or maybe even once a month for these major events. What is stopping us from having locals access that field when other fields are at capacity all the time? We need to open these spaces up. They're paid for, in part by the public, and the public should have improved access to these facilities. I highly recommend fostering tiered pricing structures in spaces and places that you know already have a high rate of usage for those non-resident uses. And really try to deliver on authentic experiences. Just as I mentioned, we know that people who travel to Canada want that Canadian experience. I had a photo there. If you can go back in slides, there was a video, and I want you guys to actually watch it later. You can keep going back through slides for me. I'll tell you when to stop. Keep going. Keep going. And stop. I'll go for it. There. Okay, so this is called skijoring. Has anyone ever heard of skijoring before? Okay, there is a video link in your package. I highly recommend checking this out. These are all BAM fights right now. You see doing that backflip and the people on those horses. So again, this is locals who are involved and engaged in the sport. We have about 20,000 people who come on one day to witness skijoring in Banff. It is a Canadian experience. I did it when I was a kid in the prairies. You essentially get pulled on your skis by people on horseback, and you go over jumps of various heights to do various ski tricks. So really a truly authentic Canadian experience, and tourists love coming to see that sense of place and what the people here, what we value and what we do. So I really think providing those authentic experiences is super, super important. And lastly, and I think the other presenters have also said this as well, you have to engage everyone and listen to all opinions and all data when making decisions when it comes to sporting events. That's all I've got. Thank you very much.